Wait, so you're telling me you're looking for a character that can be an elite controller, do really good damage, have the option of being an elite infiltrator, and have great baked-in role-playing. Well, you're in luck. Because behind today's secret door, the Undead Pact of the Chain Warlock test drive. So behind today's secret door, the Undead Pact of the Chain Warlock test drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussions about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. So before you watch this video, you may want to see the companion piece to it, Pact of the Chain Familiars and what to do with them, and the link for that will be in the pinned comment. So a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It is your chance to see how a class will play level by level and how it might compare to other classes. Because you shouldn't have to commit to playing a character based on just what you can read from the rulebook and glean from that, or by what you might be picking up from guides or picking up from builds. So a test drive isn't really a build and it's not really a guide. It's build-ish and it's guide-ish. But its real intent is for you to get that sense of whether you'll enjoy playing this character. So we'll cover role-playing considerations and, of course, go through the level-by-level mechanics. In this case, we'll be going up to level 14, and the timestamp for when we begin the level-by-level will also be in the pinned comment. So before we get started, let me just take a moment here, and I am starting a Patreon. If you would like to support the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. The link for that will be also in the pinned comment. I will also be doing a companion video to that, which will detail what levels of membership we'll offer in the Patreon. But briefly here, at the highest level of membership, I'll be offering a play by email or play by message, however you want to phrase it, campaign where you'll be able to start your own character and play with your fellow Patreon members and play in a very dangerous world that I will set out for you. So if that sounds interesting to you, please take a look at it. Okay, so let's start with role-playing considerations. So when you're playing a warlock, there are several questions you really have to ask yourself. The number one question, in my opinion, is why did you do it? Why did you make this pact? And the companion question to that is, why did the patron accept you? In this case, with an undead patron, we have a unique situation because the undead patron offers a different perspective than the other patrons do. Because the undead patron was once mortal, and that's different than the other patrons. Because they were mortal. Now, I'm sorry, before I get carried on here, the real concern here is that the undead patron is obviously really evil. So my concern with role-playing considerations here is that unless you're playing an evil character, it may not make sense for why you would be serving an undead patron. So this is a very important question. It could also create turbulence at the table. If other party members might be looking at you and they find out that you serve an undead lord, then you might have some problems. But if you have to have a very solid idea, therefore, I think, why you're playing this character, why your character entered into this, or why the patron took you. So again, because the undead was once mortal, this offers us a couple of different interesting points of view. One is that the patron may have a strange empathy for your character because they were mortal, because they understand what it was like. They may, I'm not saying that they would be forgiving or anything because they're an undead lord, for goodness sakes, but that there would, that little spin on it, that they would have an understanding of what it's like to be mortal is interesting to me. And I think it's worth really exploring as a player. And this offers us some other avenues. So if the patron was mortal, did they have family? Obviously, they had some family. But is it possible that your character is connected somehow to that undead patron? I'm not suggesting some kind of an heir situation where you would have some point of privilege with the patron or anything like that. But if that's how you want to play it, then by all means do that. What I'm suggesting is that patron's probably been in their current state for a long time. So whatever family they once belonged to, generations have come and gone. It could be that your character is a part of the family, however far removed, or it could be that you resemble someone that the patron knew in life, someone they trusted, someone they loved, had affection for, whatever. And we see this kind of thing in vampire stories all the time. And a vampire lord is one of your options. Vampire lord, lich lord, mummy lord, and Draco lich. And all of them are incredibly interesting. Whichever patron you pick doesn't matter mechanically at all in this case. It's not like the genie. So there will be no mechanical reason to pick one over the other. It's strictly a role-playing reason. Whatever you decide to be the reason why the patron accepted you, why did you do it? Now, I think one interesting spin on this from the family angle or from the trusted friend or loved one or whatever angle on your end could be you didn't make a deal with this patron. Your ancestor did. Your ancestor made a pact with this undead lord. And the terms of that pact could be that every descendant had to serve the patron, or it could be because of the ridiculous lifespan of the undead patron, maybe that every third generation or every second born or firstborn or whatever. Whatever the case, a deal was made and your character, is obligated to fulfill that. So in this case, your character could be lawful good, serving a lawful evil lich lord. And it would make perfect sense because you have to keep the word of your family. And if you didn't, there could be dire consequences to yourself, to your family, your loved ones, anyone that knows you. I mean, would you want to inspire the wrath of a lich lord or a vampire lord? Or I don't think so. So the next question is, of course, the terms of service. What is the deal between you and the patron? What you're getting the power. That's all very spelled out in the player's handbook for you. What you get. What are you giving the patron? What are you doing for the patron? And this is an important question when we're talking about things such as lich lords. I'm going to use a lich lord as an example here. We're going to take Warlock from Forgotten Realms. I'm not going to really pay attention to the Ravenloft ones because I'm assuming most of you out there are probably going to be playing in Forgotten Realms. If you're playing in Ravenloft, there's plenty of information about lich lords and vampire lords and all that stuff in Ravenloft. You don't have to dig very deep. But in Forgotten Realms, let's take Warlock for an example. And this is an insanely powerful lich lord who's been alive for undead for over 2,000 years. And he's insane. He's mad. He's brilliant, but absolutely insane. And one of the things that Warlock, one of his points of view with magic is that he understands magic and his enemies better by understanding art. that's an interesting point, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. Why this is important to find things like that is that a character, a persona like Warlock, has, amongst other resources, enormous resources, he has an army of liches at his disposal. So what are you going to do for Warlock? What is your character possibly going to do for a character like Warlock, who has armies of liches at his command, amongst other things? A lich is, if you got to level 20, maybe you're valuable, approaching a value point to a character like that. But when you already have an army of liches, there's really nothing you're going to be doing as a single 20th level warlock that's going to really be that different than what he already has at his disposal. So what makes you different? Why does he want to invest any portion of his power in you? Well, art. In the case of Warlock, maybe the term of service is that on your adventures, since you're traveling all over the place, that you're to find perhaps prescribed pieces of art. Any kind of interesting art that you find is supposed to go to him. Or maybe he has set ideas of what he wants. So, and it could be ridiculous art. And because we're going to be going with Pact of the Chain, any kind of message that you get from your patron could very easily be coming through your familiar. So keep that in mind. So perhaps you get a message from the patron, however that is, from Warlock in this case, you have to go down 2 blocks from the city from where you're at, and there's a little 5-year-old girl who's just painted something with finger paints on a simple canvas. And you were to acquire that at all costs. It could be that ridiculous because maybe he finds something in the mind of a 5-year-old's art that nobody else would appreciate but Warlock. Or maybe he's just mad. So these kinds of things offer, it could be something incredibly valuable that you're supposed to get, or something as banal as the scribblings of a child. It depends on how complicated you want to make things for your character. And that's really one of the most critical questions to ask is how involved, how complicated do you want this relationship to be? Do you want it to be something where you're constantly having to please them? Or is it just, here's the power I gave you, just kind of do the things that you know that I want you to do? It could be something as dismissive as that. It's up to you. I personally love having limitations and complications in situations like this for my characters. I like having maybe even a clock that I have to beat to achieve certain goals, or there's going to be consequences. And that's the other thing. Are there consequences for failure? I recommend working this out with the DM. All this is stuff you should work out with your DM. A lot of it I should say, if the DM has to be involved, you have to work it out with the DM. The DM doesn't have to be involved. You could just say, you could make this a completely easy peasy kind of a relationship, and there is no involvement. It's up to you. You're not under any obligation to make this difficult on yourself. But I just personally find that more interesting. Now, the other idea that I have for the Undead Patron, because they were mortal, of what a term of service could be, that isn't Warlock specific, is that they may miss having mortal senses. And it would make sense. So maybe the deal is that you share one of your senses with the patron. Pick one, and let's just take taste, for example. I think that has a lot of fun that you can do with taste. There could be the deal could be that you have to eat interesting foods. What maybe it's a very loose idea, or maybe you're getting a prescribed menu for the day from the patron in some form that maybe the familiar gives it to you or whatever. But you have to eat, and maybe it's exotic foods. Maybe the patron has very refined taste. Maybe they're disgusting foods that you would find loathsome. Or it could just be completely random. In a case like Warlock, who's mad, it could be anything. So whatever the case is, it gives you something that's fun, but plays into the idea of what an undead patron is dealing with. It gives them a chance to vicariously live through you. And that just makes a certain level of sense. That's your value to the patron. In terms of the binding mark, it's obviously entirely up to you, and you could do kind of the more obvious things, like if you serve a vampire lord, maybe you have teeth. If it's a lich lord, maybe you have red pupils, that kind of thing. But here's an interesting one, because I think that having it be unearthly or weird or creepy being or ominous is the better word. Something more ominous would be more interesting. So what if your shadow, the shadow you cast, isn't your shadow anymore? It's your patron's. So think about this like the cover of comics. Batman does this all the time, where Batman or whoever the characters is standing and they're backlit and their shadow casts all the way across the room. And it's very dramatic and very, very cool and very intimidating. Now, this is something like a patron's shadow. It could be with the Lich Lord with the crown and the robes, and with a vampire lord with the flowing cape, maybe the cowl, and with something like a Draco Lich, your shadow with the spreading bone wings and, the bone head and all that. Just very, very cool. And obviously the Mummy Lord. So something like that, something in that vein, whether, you decide to use that or something along that lines, I think is the more interesting kind of choice. And it also is the way of the patron declaring that you are theirs, but it's not always so obvious. You'd have to be looking at shadows and who really does that. And when we're talking about role-playing considerations, we should think about the familiar here. Now, once again, I'll refer you to Pact of the Chain familiars and what to do with them. I will be referring to the familiar throughout the video only in its most relevant terms to what I'm talking about. But from a role-playing standpoint, think about your familiar, because we're going to be taking, obviously, Pact of the Chain. So your boon is that super familiar is coming as a boon from your patron. So is the incarnation that you choose, and I'm going to recommend the imp, and I'm just going to refer to it, the familiar, as an imp. So if you choose something else, I'm talking about the imp, but you know what I'm talking about. So does the imp serve the patron or you? Obviously, it will obey you. It will obey all of your commands and all that. And you can make your relationship with the familiar complicated or not. But understand that this is not the kind of relationship that you see as from an imp familiar in the monster manual, unless that's how you want to play it. But the imp will certainly obey you and do what you want. But will it also obey the patron? And that's an important question. So if you're blatantly disobeying the patron's commands, what is the familiar going to do? Is he going to rat you out? Is the familiar on your side? All right, so when we talk about the race picks, there are a lot of good choices. I'm going to recommend two. One is custom lineage. That one's a really obvious pick and is very powerful. And if you go with custom lineage, I'm going to recommend taking Fey Touched for the feat, and obviously putting that +2 into your charisma, and then now you'll, with that +1, go into charisma as well. You can have an 18 at level 1 if you're going point buy or with stat array. Very powerful. I recommended it with the genie. I think it's great. But I did that before the Hexblood came out, and so I'm going to recommend the Hexblood now. I think the Hexblood is a great choice for any Warlock. You're going to, because they're starting it from character creation, you're going to get an extra 2 skills. That's nice. You're going to get a +2 and a +1, dark vision, etc., etc. You're going to get Hex and Disguise Self as bonus castings a day, and you can cast a spell again, expending a spell slot. That may sound counterintuitive to take Hex, or to be picking Hex, and I do the same thing with Fey Touched. With Custom Lineage, I take Hex for the same exact reasons, because it saves the spells known for you. And later down the line, that may become very, very important, because spells known is always important. But it doesn't matter so much right now at first level, but later on down the line, spells known is going to become a thing. That frees up a slot for you. So there's that, and a bonus cast of Hex is never bad. So even if you're not inclined to want to rely on Hex, you always have it in your back pocket, and it's a free casting, and so why not? And Disguise Self is amazing. If you've never played with a Hat of Disguise, the kinds of havoc you can create at a table for the DM is, you owe it to yourself to do it. It's a great deal of fun. So having a bonus casting of Disguise Self, not only is that going to be useful in just general D&D play, but you're going to see that specifically at level 6, this character is going to have a chance to become a very high-level infiltrator. And having Disguise Self only amplifies that. It plays to that. Everything about the Hexblood actually plays very nicely, not only with a Warlock, but with a Pact of the Chain Warlock. Because the other thing you get is the Eerie Token. And with the Eerie Token, you can do a telepathic message, which can go 10 miles, and it's a message of up to 25 words. That has obvious uses. And then you can do remote viewing. And that allows you to go into a trance-like state and see what is going on with whoever has the token. So, and then at the end of the trance, and that lasts a minute, the token is destroyed. And the token itself is a spare random body. I don't want to say body part, because it doesn't have to be. It could be hair, it could be a tooth, it could be a fingernail, and you pluck that out, and that's the Eerie Token, and it grows back. So in the hands of a flying invisible familiar, something like remote viewing allows you to possibly plant that token either in an area or on a target. Stealth considerations are still a thing here, so just because they don't see the familiar doesn't mean that they wouldn't feel it if you're trying to go into a pouch or something like that on their person. But it would allow the familiar would be able to plant it in places where then you would have the chance to do remote viewing, which is essentially like scrying. So having, in addition to the two great spells, having a mini sending and a mini scrying available to you in general is just great. But to have that as early as first level is fantastic. So because of all of that synergy, I'm going to recommend the Hexblood. Obviously, do with it what you want, but that's what I'm going to be referring to throughout the test drive. I'll also give what the custom lineage, because they'll have that 18 when we do damage comparisons. I will mention what the custom lineage would do, because it'll do a little bit more from levels 1 through 7, because it's always going to be a little higher. I should make one more note about the Hexblood here. Obviously, you're going to want to have a 16 charisma. I think that you're going to be best served by putting that +1 actually into your 15 to get a 16 dexterity as well as a 16 charisma. So put the +2 into your 14. The Undead Warlock is a controller, as you'll quickly see, and that ability to get that control effect as early in the turn as possible is very important. So is making Constitution or concentration saves. So Constitution is still good, but I would tend towards taking the Dexterity, and obviously Dexterity is a great stat anyway. Okay, so let's start the level by level. I think it's worth noting, just as a point of curiosity here, you'll quickly see that the Undead Patron is essentially something like a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of the Fiend and the Fae. And we'll get to that when we talk about Form of Dread. It becomes rather obvious that you get the fear effect from the Fae and you get the temporary hit points from the Fiend. And in many cases, you get a better version of both, you could argue. And I'm not saying that they're all the power of the Fae and all the power of the Fiend, but you get the best effects of those, or the ones that you're probably taking the Patron for, in the Undead. And when we get to level 6, you get one of the most optimal reasons for why you would take the Genie. But we'll get there when we get to level 6. So level 1, obviously you get 1 spell slot. That's not great. It's going to stink. But if you went Hexblood or if you went with Custom Lineage, you're going to have an extra casting of Hex. And if you went with Hexblood, you're going to get an extra casting of Disguise Self. So it's not as bad as it would be for a Warlock character that were not one of those 2 races. For the Patron spells, you get Bane and False Life. We're going to take Bane. And of course, you get the Form of Dread. And this is it. This is why you take the Undead Patron. Form of Dread takes a bonus action to activate. That's important to note because I'm going to highly recommend using Hex, but on your first turn, you're going to have to make a choice between Hex and Form of Dread. I'm assuming you're going to take Form of Dread first. So Form of Dread takes a bonus action to activate. It lasts for a minute, and you take on a fearsome image of your patron. When you activate it, you get 1d10 plus your Warlock level in temporary hit points. And so that's where I'm talking about how it's like the Fiend. But because it's on demand, you could argue that it's a little bit better. And once per turn, when you hit with an attack roll, you can force the target to make a wisdom saving throw. If they fail, they are frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Now, the frightened condition, obviously, they get disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. That's what probably most people are going to be paying attention to, and it is great. That's a great debuff. But that's not the part of the frightened condition that I'm terribly interested in. They are unable, and this all requires you to be within line of sight of the target. While they're frightened of you, they are not able to willingly move closer to you. And you're going to quickly see at level 2 how that is going to be the thing that is going to drive your DM crazy. We'll get there. But they're frightened of you until the end of your next turn. This is insanely powerful. You're also immune to the frightened condition. So those are the terms of the form of dread. This is the backbone of how the character operates. You get them uses of it equal to your proficiency bonus. So that is the problem. From levels 1 through 4, you can't do this if you're having multiple encounters in a day. So you're going to have to pick your spots. Once you get a +3 proficiency bonus, then that's probably as many combats as you're going to have in a day by my estimation. But there's going to be many days where you're going to have to pick and choose. I wouldn't use it willy-nilly because your DM, especially at level 5, when you get that +3, may throw an encounter out there just to draw out a use of it when they have a few more encounters planned. So quickly survey the situation and see if it's worthy of using your form of dread. But once you're hitting 5th level, I think you can activate it in most cases, but like I said, you still want to survey it. So even from 1st level, what we are going to get is basically a choice of play styles that you can make for each encounter. You don't have to commit to it as a career kind of path. That's what's also very nice. So if you want to go with, you're always going to have control because of that fear, but you can go damage and control with just running with Hex and then using Form of Dread. But then you can go more full control by abandoning Hex and casting Bane. And of course, Bane is going to give them a debuff. Whoever fails the saving throw is going to get a debuff to their saving throws, which is going to be a problem for your Form of Dread, which you're going to be hammering with them every single turn. Of course, you have to hit. So from early levels, there's going to be times where you miss, and that's going to stink. But once you get to 2 Eldritch Blasts a turn, you're going to hit most likely once. And at 3rd level, you're going to be hitting much more reliably. So at levels 1 and 2, you're going to have some problems with there's going to be times where you're just going to miss. You're going to have about a 60% chance when hitting against the curve. But when you go with Bane, it's going to making those saving throws really, really difficult. And I call this the first instance of going, and you'll forgive the pun, full dreadlock. So going full dreadlock, and that's what I'm going to be meaning, is when you're going full control, you're going full dreadlock to go full control. Now, in terms of what spells I recommend at this level, strangely enough, I would say go with Comprehend Languages. It's very likely that you're going to want to play the Infiltrator the way I'm describing all of this at some point or another. And even if you're not going Infiltrator, Comprehend Languages is just a really useful spell. Now, it can be hyper redundant if somebody else in the party has it, but your selection choices at 1st level are not terribly good. And if you find it not useful, then just trade it out at upper levels. Your average damage per round at level 1 is not great, but it's also not all that awful. 5.85 is how much you can expect on average. That's kind of what it's like being 1st level. Okay, 2nd level, and this is a massive upgrade for your character in power. You'll see. So at 2nd level, you get your Warlock invocations. You also get 2 spell slots. That's a huge upgrade in and of itself, but you get the invocations. So we're going to take Agonizing Blast because we're going with Eldritch Blast. And we're going to take Repelling Blast. And both of those, almost any given Warlock who takes Eldritch Blast are going to take them. And they are big upgrades. Both are fantastic. Repelling Blast doesn't offer a saving throw, and it moves them back on a hit, moves the target back 10 feet on a hit. But in the hands of an undead Warlock in Form of Dread, this is where the DM starts having nightmares. Think about it for a moment. Where the Warlock is probably, an Eldritch Blast casting Warlock is probably going to be. If you're not, I would recommend that you stay in the back. Or if you need to be on the flank to get a clear line of sight, then do that. But stay behind your party. So whatever you hit, when you hit, you're moving them back 10 feet. If that target failed its saving throw, it cannot willingly move closer to you. That means that it can't even re-engage the other party if you're staying in any kind of formation. People aren't running willy-nilly all over the map. You're going to want to communicate with your party how effective this is. Most enemies don't have a ranged option. If they failed their saving throw and they have a ranged option, they can still do something, but they'll do it with disadvantage. But if they don't, that target is moved back 10 feet and cannot re-engage, cannot move closer. Therefore, they cannot attain melee unless the party obligates them by advancing on them. So you want to be very clear that whatever I hit, don't advance on it. By all means, let the party, if they want, attack it with ranged attacks. But that target that failed their save is effectively out of the combat for that round until the end of your next turn. So it's like mini banishment, but you're still able to attack it. And it doesn't disrupt the effect of your control. And there's nothing the target can really do about it. The target doesn't have... Now, I should point out here that if the target is a spellcaster, this is far less effective. You'll still be damaging it. It still can't move closer, but a lot of spells don't require an attack roll, so disadvantage isn't going to mean very much. So that is the one little chink here. There are two. There's this and enemies that are immune to the fear condition, but that isn't as many as you might think. So, but spellcasters in particular are not going to be overly troubled unless they're spellcasters that are doing attack rolls, in which case they're still going to be suffering from disadvantage. But this is why Form of Dread with Repelling Blast is such a killer combination. And throughout your entire career as an undead warlock, you're going to just create nightmare after nightmare after nightmare for your DM. There is no other character that I can think of that has this kind of control that they can exert round after round after round. Well, you are expending a resource because of your Form of Dread. So I suppose you are expending a resource. But other than that, you're not expending a resource. There's no spell slots needed for this. This is insanely powerful. And because we have Agonizing Blast now, your average damage per round jumps to 7.65. And for the custom character, would be going to an 8.9. So they're always going to have that little edge. It's nice. I just like the utility aspect of everything that the Hexblade offers a little bit more. And of course, you get that extra stat bump. All right, third level. Another major upgrade in power. And of course, just about every character in D&D gets a major upgrade at third level. Yours is your Pact boon, primarily, and we'll get to that in a moment. But of course, you get second level spells. That's a huge upgrade. So I'm going to recommend taking Mirror Image and Invisibility. Mirror Image has the great luxury for you in that it doesn't require concentration. So it plays nice with Hex or Bane or whatever other concentration spell you might want to use. Invisibility, obviously, is fantastic in general, but in your role as an infiltrator later, it begins now, actually, with Invisibility and Disguise Self. That is a nice way of being able to enter, and then once you're within a target area, being able to look. You could use it either way. You could use Disguise Self to get in, and then once in and the spell runs out, if you're in there for a very long time, use Invisibility to get out, or vice versa. Your patron spells are Blindness, Deafness, and Phantasmal Force. Now, blindness, deafness, you might want to take it. I'm not going to make a strong recommendation for it either way, but it doesn't require concentration. So it definitely has that going for it. And of course, we're talking the Pact boon. We're talking Pact of the Chain, and you get the imp. I could go on and on and on about what you get to do now. Please, if you don't know, go watch the video Pact of the Chain Familiars and what to do with them. But I'm going to say take the imp. The Quasit is the second choice. Now, you might say, Matt, the Quasit has the fear ability, and it does. Here's the big problem with the Quasit. It has some stat things that I could bore you with of why it's slightly inferior to the imp. That's not really the big deal. The big deal to me is the imp can fly, be invisible, and has hands all at the same time. Its utility is therefore amazing, and its ability to get anywhere and open doors or manipulate objects or whatever is great. The Quasit, on the other hand, always does have hands unless it needs to fly, because it doesn't fly. So it cannot fly, be invisible, and have hands all at the same time. The fear ability is nice. I don't really want the familiar really terribly engaged in combat. I'm going to be using the imp throughout this test drive now. I believe that its strongest use is not in, because I'm not going to recommend that you go with investment at the Chainmaster at any point. Our invocations are going to be in the service of Form of Dread. What I'm going to say that you should be doing with the imp is the help action. You need to hit. This character, above all other ones, needs to hit to exert that control. Because remember, they still get a saving throw. So you have to both hit and they get a saving throw. So even if you do hit, it's not a guarantee that you're going to exert control over the target. But you have to hit for them to have to make the save. So getting the help action, especially at these low levels, from the imp is going to be critical. Now, I'll point out that the help action does not violate the imp's invisibility. And because opportunity attacks only can be done on targets that can be seen, the imp basically has a flyby effect while it's invisible. So it can move up, perform the help action, and move away, all while maintaining invisibility. Now, there are all kinds of things you can do with the imp, and I don't want to go into that. But from here on, you're going to want to keep a keen eye out for a wand of magic missiles, but most importantly, a bag of holding. The imp can carry that bag of holding, and we're going to make great use of that. It's a great thing for the imp to have in general. But at level 6, it's going to become a big deal to have a bag of holding. They aren't hard to get, so I'm going to assume by level 6 that you'll have one. Now, because of the help interaction, your damage jumps from 7.65 to 11.1. So not only is it going to make it more reliable for exerting your control effect, but because you're hitting more frequently, 85% of the time, roughly, then you're obviously going to be doing more damage. And with the help action, a custom lineage character their damage will jump to 12.6 per round. Okay, 4th level. You get your ASI, big bump for everybody. In both cases, for the custom and for the Hexblood, we're just going to take a straight up stat bump and take +2 to charisma. Your damage per round for the Hexblood with the help action will be 11.95, which is quite good for 3rd level, and 13.5 for the custom. Okay, 5th level is obviously a big level for everybody. It's a big level for you now. You get 2 Eldritch Blasts per round. That's a big, big deal. It makes hitting almost certain at this point, having a roughly 85% chance with the help action and then your standard 60% chance in the second one. So you should be hitting to be able to exert control every single time now. That's a big deal. And of course, we get third level spells. So for third level spells, the big standouts here are Counterspell and Hypnotic Pattern. There is another one, which is interesting, and I'll get to patron spells in a moment. Summon Shadow Spawn is interesting. If you go with the fear option with Summon Shadow Spawn, that is the moment you summon it, it can take that action and create that fear bomb, but that fear bomb is enormous. So anybody that fails in that it's just sort of like what you're doing with Form of Dread, but on steroids now, and Repelling Blast will work exactly the same. But now you could hit multiple targets with it. And you have a summons. So it's a nice choice, but that fear bomb is big and it goes off from the target. So you would have to cast it in such a way that your Repelling Blast will make it impossible for them to come closer to you, but they're going to be afraid of that thing. And so this gets very, very, very tricky. So I would recommend, I'm not giving it a full recommendation for that, but take a strong look at it. But the problem is the size of that thing, because it has to be away from your party. For patron spells, you're going to get Phantom Steed and Speak with Dead. I'm not a fan of either of those, really. I know that some people really love Phantom Steed. If you want to take it, I'm not going to recommend that you take either. They're certainly not critical to what I'm doing here and wanting to point out. So it's really up to you. Speak with Dead is one of those things that should be better than it is. And I won't bore you with it because I'm not going to recommend it, but I have real trouble with how that works. And Phantom Steed can be good. So that's as far as I can go with it. For the invocation, we get an extra invocation at 5th level, another big thing. I'm going to obviously suggest going with Eldritch Mind. The ability to maintain concentration, granted, a lot of it is just going to be to protect Hex, but if you're wanting to drop Hypnotic Pattern, or whenever you're wanting to drop a concentration spell, you don't have spell slots to burn. So you want to protect them at all costs. So Eldritch Mind is invaluable. It's essentially like getting a feat. In fact, I think Eldritch Mind is one of those almost must-haves for any Warlock. And your average damage per round, this is again with the help action, is 20.2 at 5th level, which is obviously above what you would expect for your standard Warlock, and then it's going to go up. So you're already now beginning to outpace average. You're not into really good damage yet, but you're about to be. And then 23.05 for custom is significantly better than average. So I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the trick at 5th level at this point. Hex now lasts for 8 hours. The trick is this. You can cast Hex for free most of the time now. Because it lasts for 8 hours, you don't need a long rest as a Warlock. Your spell slots are recovered on short rests. So if you don't need to recover hit points and you don't need to recover hit dice, or you're willing to forego either, then don't take the long rest at the party, but take the 6 hours of sleep that you need to avoid the exhausted condition. And then an hour before the 8 hours, you're carrying a jar of beetles with you now at all times. Take out a beetle, cast Hex on it, kill the beetle, put the jar away, and take a short rest. So read a book, take a bath, get dressed, eat breakfast, whatever for that hour. And then off you go. And now you've got 7 more hours of Hex running for free. And if you are in need of the long rest, you can still do the same thing by taking a short rest immediately after the long rest, provided that you don't have to like get up and go right away. So you get up from the long rest, do the thing with the beetle, hex the beetle, kill the beetle, and then you're just an hour delayed. That may not be possible at all times, but like I said, in most cases, you should be able to start the day with hex for free. So a big bonus for you at 5th level. And at 6th level, this is a magic level for you. And it isn't obviously one. It kind of is in one way, but not in the other. You now no longer need to eat, drink, or breathe. Now that may sound like something of a flavor idea, but it isn't. And we'll get to that in just a moment because there's another aspect to Grave Touched. Once per turn, you can turn your damage necrotic. And if you do that, so that can be useful in avoiding, it's not particularly useful for you in most cases, but it might be useful if the target has damage resistance and you want to avoid it. But because you're using Eldritch Blast, it's not very likely. But if you do turn it necrotic while you have Form of Dread active, and now you're using it 3 times a day at 5th level, you get to add a damage die. Now, Eldritch Blasts is a D10. So you're getting to, once per turn, add a D10 to damage. So that's a significant damage bump. An extra D10 in a round is 5.5. That's a significant amount of extra damage. And now your damage really begins to get into very good. You're still not in that top 10% of damage dealers, but you're right there, right behind them. So aside from that, Grave Touched, that eat, drink, or breathe, the eat or drink will obviously have great utility in survival situations or survival campaigns or those type of things. But breathing, well, that does a lot of things. Not needing to breathe means that you can do underwater exploration much, much, much more easily now, at will. And that opens up all kinds of things for you. It also means that if you're in a situation where a gas trap goes off in a dungeon or something like that, you could simply not breathe it. Now, the DM may argue that you did, but why would you be breathing to begin with if you don't need to? So you're effectively immune to poison gas situations. That's going to be obviously niche, but this is Dungeons and Dragons. It's going to happen sooner or later. But the big get here with not having to breathe is the familiar is carrying a bag of holding. You can climb into the bag of holding. Now, bags of holding have 10 minutes of air in them, but you don't need that air. So now, the familiar, flying and invisible, can carry you, flying and invisible, to wherever it's going. So this is like that aspect of the genie. One of the strongest aspects of the genie is its ability to just infiltrate just about anywhere. And once you're out of the bag, you obviously have ways of getting out via invisibility or disguise self, which you always have available to you. So this is something you cannot underestimate how strong and useful this is. So what I really love about Pact of the Chain, and I love Pact of the Chain obviously in general. I think it's the strongest of the boons. But its interaction points, both with this patron and with the race, are what really make this interesting to me. There's so many nice little combinations and interactions that are going on here that this is just a lot of fun. You're having a blast at this point. Now you're doing high damage, massive control, and you're a top tier infiltrator. Flying and invisible is really hard to detect. Now, I should just note here on the bag of holding that it is not as good as, obviously, as the genie, and I'm not trying to sell you that it is. as good as the genie. The genie can tell what's going on outside. It can hear everything that's going on outside. You can't in the bag of holding. So you're going to have to take your best guess. Now, the imp could open it up and just say, hey, come on, buddy, get out. You could always do that. But you don't have the telepathic bond going on with the familiar, with the imp, because you're in a different plane of existence while you're in the bag of holding. So, but Jeremy Crawford did rule on Twitter, I believe, or X or whatever we're calling it now, that someone in a bag of holding can just get out. So you don't have to be withdrawn by the imp. You're not depending on the imp to make the call, but you may be wanting to tell the imp before you get in, hey, when we get there, just open the bag so I'm not having to guess. So it isn't as good as the genie by any means, and you don't have the kind of like massive storage that the genie has or anything like that, but you're getting the meatiest, most important, essential part of it. You get that, just like from the Fiend and from the Fae. So you're getting really the best parts of 3 patrons with the Undead Patron. This is a gas. So your damage now at 6th level is 25.97 with the help action. That's fantastic. That's like 50% higher than the normal genie, or sorry, the normal warlock. That's fantastic. And if you went with custom, it's 28.8. That's obviously fantastic. It's better than 50%. So either way you go, you're doing great damage, but and the custom lineage character was only going to be enjoying this advantage up until level 8. But it is that's a long time, levels 1 through 7. So, I mean, if damage is your big thing, custom lineage is going to be the way to go. But like I said, the Hexblood can do more things, and it will move a little bit earlier every round. So I would still favor the Hexblood, but every time I say the damage out loud for the custom, I go, why did I recommend that to begin with? But it's the utility. I just think it has more fun in it. Okay, 7th level. We get 4th level spells. Now the fun is really getting crazy. And we get yet another amazing combo here. We get Death Ward and Greater Invisibility from the patron. Now, normally, you would think Greater Invisibility would be the go-to pick. No. Take Death Ward. Why? It's non-concentration, and it lasts 8 hours. You can do the same trick that you're doing with Hex at 5th level. Now you can do it with Death Ward too. So now, every morning, you wake up, you get Hex for free, you cast Death Ward, you've got both running for 7 hours for free. Now, Death Ward isn't amazing, but hey, if it's for free, why not? You have become your first stage of being unkillable. You will get to the point where killing you is going to become virtually impossible. Not impossible, but really, really close to impossible. And for the standout spell for 4th level, of course, Dimension Door. Dimension Door is an amazing spell, and the utility it can serve just in any kind of situation. It could be simple utility. It could be just a get out of jail free card if things are going really, really bad for you. So yeah, Dimension Door. And of course we get another invocation. Now, this is finally where you're at a point where you can start making your own picks that aren't essential. So the 3 that jump to mind would be, to me, I love Ghostly Gaze, especially in your role as a potential infiltrator. Ghostly Gaze is better than a Ring of X-ray vision, and the utility of that can't be underestimated. It's amazingly useful. It's not essential, so this is a matter of taste. Lance of Lethargy is a strong choice. I would lean on Ghostly Gaze. Voice of the Chainmaster is great. If you feel you need that, then Voice of the Chainmaster and Ghostly Gaze it's just, which one do you prefer? So I would recommend strongly Voice of the Chainmaster or Ghostly Gaze, but if you were looking for a combat invocation, I would be going with Lance of Lethargy. Maddening Hex isn't going to be as good I've recommended that before with the Genie. The problem here is that you get too many bonus action problems because you've got Form of Dread already, then with Hex, and then if Maddening Hex. Another combat pick would be Grasp of Hadar. In your case, you don't really want to be pulling anything towards you. You want to be pushing them away because of the fear effect. But in certain situations, Grasp of Hadar, to be able to pull things back into an ongoing AoE, can be very useful. So in combat, Lance of Lethargy or Grasp of Hadar would be my picks. Okay, 8th level, we get the ASI. So Hexblood takes +2 to their charisma, and the custom, which already has a 20 from 4th level, now should take alert. Definitely should take alert. I should point out, because I haven't been focusing on the custom, that really I would recommend, as much as it pains me, I think because going first is so important for control, that at 4th level, the custom, if you went with custom, you might want it to stand on that 18, keep it in your pocket, and then go ahead and take alert at 4th level. At that point, you're going to lose your damage advantage from being ahead of the curve, but you're going to be going first. I mean, a lot. So, but now you take alert for sure. Your average damage now is 27.4 in both cases because now you're equaled out. So, very good damage. This damage puts you still within that top 10%. So, the ability to be hitting that hard and exerting that level of control and doing all the other stuff that I've mentioned, every level's been great. So now at this point, at 8th level, you could switch out of Pact of the Chain. If you wanted to, you can switch the boon at an ASI. You could opt for one of the other boons if you wanted to, but I would stick with Pact of the Chain. It's going to keep serving you, and I'm going to assume that throughout the rest of this. But I should note that, because now is the point where you could freely switch and you're not going to be interfering. You'll have the freedom to have the invocations to spend to make that new boon worthwhile. Okay, 9th level. This is just great. You get 5th level spells. It's the last of your pack magic spells. So you take Synaptic Static and you take Scrying. Clearly Scrying is great. Synaptic Static is obviously great. But in your case, it's amazing. So you open the round, you Form of Dread, you cast Synaptic Static. Whoever in that, assuming you have the targets, it's an AoE. Whoever fails their save on Synaptic Static now gets further debuffs to further saving throws. Now, Warlocks typically take Synaptic Static, but the problem really is that Synaptic Static is really only as useful as follow-up saving throws are. So, if that made any sense, if that was a sentence that made sense, I think you know what I mean. So, if you went early in the round, then it's a little bit better but if you're going mid to late round, if that happens in initiative, then Synaptic Static loses a lot of value. Why? Because all the big spells get cast in the first round, almost always. So the saves are all happening in round 1. If Synaptic Static is happening mid to late round, it loses a lot of value, but not in your case. Whenever you cast it, you're targeting whoever failed. And if And you're forcing them to make wisdom saving throws every single round, in addition to being a debuff for your party. So Synaptic Static is the full bloom of going Dreadlock, but you're damaging the enemy while gaining control because it doesn't interfere with Hex. So you're doing damage, getting control, and debuffing. Amazing combination. And just, again, a nightmare. And Synaptic Static, because it's psychic damage, is not often resisted or immune. Now, I enjoy this kind of thing. So just note here for yourself that if you can cast Synaptic Static and get 3 targets on it when you cast it or more, but if you have 3 and you cast it twice in a day, it will up your expected damage per round. Increase your overall damage per round by 7.6. Obviously, the impact in that round is significant, but it's upping your overall, because we don't often think of how damage per round for spellcasters, but you need to note that for yourself if people are bragging about how much damage they are, just so you can keep it in yourself. You're doing great. That's what the test drive is for, is so that you don't feel like you're missing out, or I wish I did this, or I wish I had done that. You're doing great. You couldn't be doing much better, really. Now, for the patron spells, you get Anti-Life Shell and you get Cloud Kill. Now, I'm going to talk about Cloud Kill. I don't recommend either. But if you did go with Cloud Kill, there is one interesting point in it for me. And that is that it moves away from the party every turn from wherever you cast it. So theoretically, you could put the target into a situation, because they can't move forward if they are under the fear effect and you're repelling blasting them, that it could almost move with the cloud. So you could get more value out of the cloud than you might otherwise get. So if that sounds valuable to you, if that sounds like if you'd like one more cool little trick to pull out of your pocket, then go ahead and take Cloud Kill. But by all means, take Scrying, and obviously you take Synaptic Static. But Cloud Kill, maybe. It could be fun. Okay, at 10th level, you gain Necrotic Husk. So here comes the unkillable part. First of all, you gain resistance to necrotic damage, but while you're in your form of dread, and now, of course, we are using that 4 times a day with our proficiency bonus from earlier. But if you're in the form of dread, now you're immune to necrotic damage. That's nice, and in certain campaigns, that can be invaluable, actually. But if you should drop to 0 hit points, you can elect to have 1 instead. And if you do, every creature within 30 feet takes 2d10 necrotic damage, no save. You gain 1 level of exhaustion, and you can't use it again for 1d4 long rests or days. So, if you've had Death Ward going for free, remember that? You use that first. So, and I don't think you have the option with Death Ward. I think you would have to use it first, the way it's worded. So Death Ward would go off first. Then you have Necrotic Husk. So the DM is going to have to drop you to 0 3 times to get you to make a single death saving throw. It's hard to kill characters in D&D 5th edition without any of this kind of special stuff. Death is actually pretty hard to come by. But when you're getting damage resistances, in some campaigns that's going to be invaluable, and you've got temporary hit points from Form of Dread, and those just keep going up and up and up, so you're defensively buffed, getting you to 0 can be trickier than a normal Warlock. But now you have to do it 3 times just to get 1 death saving throw. So is it impossible to kill you? No, but it's from all practical standpoints, it's next to impossible to kill you. So that's why I was saying virtually impossible to kill. So if you like the idea of all that defensive buffs, and you like the control effect, and you like the ability to infiltrate at that level and the other utility interactions, what isn't to love about a character like this? And the style. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic character. So at 11th level, we get again, another massive bump. So we're getting 6th level spells, our Mystic Arcanum. We're getting a 3rd Eldritch Blast Bolt and our 3rd spell slot for our Pack Magic. So this is just a massive bump. For the Mystic Arcanum, your average damage per round now with the help action is 36.55. That's fantastic. At 12th level, we get the ASI. And for the Hexblade, I would you take Alert. For custom, take what you like. I think I would shore up one of my stats. So you've already got the quickness in Alert. I would probably shore up my Constitution because both of them are going to be on the lower end because you only got that one stat bump. So I probably Constitution would be my pick for custom. Average damage per round is now 36.55, and you do get another invocation. And here, again, is dealer's choice. So what I've recommended before stays on the table. So if you took Ghostly Gaze, then look at Voice of the Chainmaster. If you took Voice of the Chainmaster, look at Ghostly Gaze, or Grasp of Hadar, or Lance of Lethargy. Those are the 4. And just as you see fit, the combat ones don't matter that much to me, frankly. It would be between those 2 that I would set my mind on. 13th level, and we get our 7th level Mystic Arcanum. And of course, you take Force Cage. This character is just insanely powerful now. Just stop and think back through and think about any level. You've gone single class Warlock all this way. Do you feel like there's something you're missing out on? Do you feel as if, but the wizard's doing all this and the cleric's doing all that? Yeah, but look at what all you're doing. You're doing stuff that money can't buy and can't be replicated by other classes so easily. The Undead Warlock has got to, in my opinion, is the most powerful patron option, period. And I love the Genie. You all know I love the Genie. And the Genie's up there. And it does things better than the Undead. But in terms of combat, there is no patron that offers more combat advantages because of the control and the defense and the damage. What else do you want? And finally, at 14th level, as if your unkillableness wasn't bad before, it gets even worse for the DM. Because now you get Spirit Projection. Spirit Projection, you can only do it once per long rest. It takes an action. It lasts an hour. You're basically stepping outside of your body. Any damage that should happen to the projection, your spirit projection, or to your body affects both. You have resistance to piercing, slashing. That's been a long shoot. Piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning. I was going to say something like sludgeoning. Piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning. Damage in the spirit projection. So all of your physical, you're not carrying anything with you in the spirit projection, but it doesn't say that you can't take them from your body. And it doesn't, even though your body can move through solid objects, it doesn't say that you can't take items with you. Bear that in mind. You also gain a flying speed equal to your walking speed. Your body is incorporeal, so you can move through solid objects. If you should end your turn in another creature or solid object, you take 1d10 force damage. If your form of dread is active, you gain hit points equal to half of the necrotic damage you dealt that turn, once per turn. Half the damage, half the hit points dealt in necrotic damage. So you're immune to necrotic damage. You have resistance to slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing. I mean, granted, you're 14th level. And you have temporary hit points. So remember that you're taking half, and then it's going on to your temporary hit points. So effectively, it's doubling your temporary hit points for most forms of damage. And if anything does get through, well, you're getting it right back with damage you're going to be dealing. Then the DM still has to somehow bring you to 0. It's just another way of making you virtually unkillable. It also amplifies your infiltration ability or your ability to get out after an infiltration. You are now one of the greatest infiltrators because you're passing right through solid objects. And while spirit projection is active, conjuration and necromancy spells don't require components or materials that lack a gold cost. So I should point out at this point with spirit projection, you obviously can just shove the body in the bag of holding, right? And then spirit project yourself out. So what you do with the body, you have the ultimate hidey hole right now. Now, there could still be complications with that, but that would be the number one move in my book. So once in a day for an hour, you're going to be able to pull this trick out. The problem is, of course, that all of your stuff is on your body. If you have a magic item that, like a wand or something that's going to make your attack rolls better, take it with you. The problem will be that even though the rules don't say that you can't use it, they also don't say that anything you're carrying becomes incorporeal also. So if you move through a wall, if that's what you're wanting to do with the form of dread, don't take anything with you because it'll just hit the solid object and fall. So if you're using it for infiltration, take nothing with you. If you're using it for combat, go ahead and take your stuff with you and use it. And when the projection is over, spirit projection is over, you can either have the body teleport to where the spirit projection is, or the spirit projection can teleport to the body. Now, if you did put the body in the bag of holding, that could be a problem if your only way back to the body is, in fact, that teleport. Because it is on another plane of existence, that could be a problem. So talk to the DM about how they're going to rule on that. Typically speaking, I don't think that you're ever going to get into that hour thing. But forgetting the bag of holding for a moment, it is a nice way of being able to move and then have the body come to you, or you can just get out of jail and go to the body. So there's all kinds of utility with spirit projection. So that's it. We're stopping here. That's the last class feature the last class feature for the patron. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. If you're inclined to support the channel, please check out my Patreon. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.